Hello, people. Oh, I got a fun one this week. Well, they're fun every week, but this one's more funner than extra. This week is the Return of the King. Aragorn, son of Arathorn. Oh yes. Oh man, I'm covering the title. I have a mass. I have a lot of mass editions, a mass print editions. Um, I got two versions of the movie, like right there, like 2 feet from me. But I was looking over all the other editions I have, and then it's like I found this retro one. Look at that cover. I think this is art done by Tolkien himself. I think it's a bit of a different take on old Barad-dûr. He even he even writes on the back. He goes, "This paperback edition and no other has been published with my consent and cooperation. Those who approve of courtesy to living authors will purchase it and no others." I don't know why that's kind of funny. I guess it doesn't register in my head that back in what, the 70s, the 60s, when was this? Back in the back in the 70s, that they'd had like, instead of stealing music, you'd just steal books. I mean, who's printing up an entire unauthorized edition of a book? Okay, anyway, I do like this cover. I don't read this one though. I just have it, right? You want all the wear and tear on the least one. What's the other one I have? You know it. If if you're a certain age, it's the one I saw in the library when I was young. Not the greatest artwork, but it's, I guess, unique. I don't know. Okay. Um Obviously why I got this one is because I had read the second one. I don't know what kind of savage could read The Fellowship, The Two Towers, and then just stop. Who could do that? Not I. Um, my rating's clearly a 5 out of 5. No question here. It's a book anyone and everyone can read. All age groups, all skill levels, all reader interest levels. Everyone has something. You'll just enjoy the book. It's just so good. So it's a 5 out of 5. It's almost cheating, right? Because it was written as one big it was written as one big fat unit, right? That's how he intended it, in one volume. That's why when you read through, you get to, it says book 5, book 6, etc. He had them intended as one big unit. Now the publisher probably could have got away with like 6 little books, right? 6 tiny little ones, because you turn each book in the series into its own bound book. You're just making more money. But he didn't. He cut it into 3. I think it's a good cut. I think it was a good cut, all in all. So let's, now I will at times. This isn't like a compare and contrast to the movie. I'm not going to do that specifically, but I'm going to mention the movies. I've seen the movies. You know I've seen the movies if this is within arm's reach, right? I mean, who are kidding? I've seen the movie. I love this though. Look at that art, bro. Um, what is it? Howe? John Howe, I think, or Allen. I forget which one. In any case, I think a lot of the people who maybe will see this movie, probably in the future at least, most of the people who come to Lord of the Rings will come through the movie. So I'm not going to have too many qualms about delineations, right? And I think the movies do a great job. I don't know of an actual Tolkien fan who's like I shun the movies, right? It's kind of ridiculous. So if you hear me mention it on the offhand, that's about. All right, this one picks up. It picks up right where the last one left off, and Pippin is on Shadowfax with Gandalf, and they're just rolling on down the line. He's trying to get him to Gondor, and I just it reminds you instantly, almost in page one or two, of why you love or why I love these books. He's racing along, and Pippin will ask a question of something, and then he'll just start hitting them with lore, right? Like they start seeing the signal fires go off, and then he's talking about that's this mountain and that's that signal and that's this signal, and back in the day they didn't need it because they had the seven seeing stones, right? And he just sort of throws it in passing, but it fills up your mind as a reader with all this sort of back history. It it gives so much foundation. Just somehow in your reader's mind it's just unlocked, pre-built, even though it was never there. It's absolutely incredible. We get to the citadel. People forget it's a citadel, a fortress. The fortress of Minas Tirith. Yeah, what is it? Osgiliath was the town. That's where everyone wanted to live. And then Minas Tirith was the fort. But times got rough. So you had to abandon one. You got to abandon the pretty one. Sucks. So we get in there. We meet Denethor. Another great element I like, and it's Tolkien's power levels. If you've seen Dragon Ball Z or these kind of animes, this person beats that person. So if this person can come in and just smoke that person, you instantly know the power levels. Who's stronger than who? What kind of a test is this for our hero, etc., etc. But here, you wouldn't think that applies. But here, you have Gandalf. He is clearly a hero the reader knows. We trust. He's always had the answers, and we love him. We love Gandalf. So when he essentially gets eye to eye with Denethor, right? The way he comes off, the way Gandalf treats him, it elevates Denethor. It elevates the stewards of Gondor. It elevates this whole city of Minas Tirith. Because Denethor he's not, I wouldn't say stronger, but like Gandalf talking to the barkeeper, Butterball, Barlaman, right? He's sort of like flipping with him, like, bro, the next time you do this, I'm going to what for you? But he's not flippant with this person, right? So, built in. I've seen him be flippant with people who can be flippant with. So, as a reader, I automatically know this person has authority enough that it matters to a character that I know, right? So that when Denethor, or we're having these question and answers in this chamber, I get the sense of the trouble we can be in, right? So it builds a new character and builds, it moves the plot forward. Because if you don't as a reader have any sense of the stakes involved in a war, in a battle, in losing the bridge, or whatever what is it? Whatever the little writing item is, element, whatever we're using, if it's not important, then it's just not important. You have to make it important as the writer. Perfect. Does a perfect job. Now, I don't remember if he says it later on or not. I think they say that Denethor has some of like the old blood in him. That's what they always will say, something like this. And that's ye old Numenorian blood from back way back. And it's again, you see this in life as well, right? This King of England was born, and then his brother was born next. And they're like, it should have been the other way because he's bigger and stronger, and he's a weakling and an idiot. So Denethor could have come from the line of the kings, but fate turned out that he doesn't. And there's a whole backstory to all of this, right? Where you could see a thread going through where if Faramir, Boromir's brother, if Faramir had gone on the quest and not Boromir, right? Then I could see a thread where there's resistance in the end. Let's say they still manage, everything manages that there is a thread because Denethor and Boromir, prideful people, all people sort of with ability end up a little bit prideful, where they would have resisted Aragorn's ascension to the throne, right? You could have had civil war. It feels so real, even though it's not stated, it's just an undercurrent. It feels so real in this book. In a book with orcs, in a book with flying Nazgul evil things. You know, to have this sort of a real human interaction element underlying, just as an undercurrent. It just shows Tolkien's skill. It's just incredible. And it's fun on a reread or a reread to have these thoughts floating in your head as you read through these situations. Because that's how it is for me, obviously. On first reading, I'm just on the ride, but on the third and on the fourth and on the fifth reading, you have all these things that swirl in your mind along with the story. Your mind never drifts. He has a scene where, of course, the signal fires went out, so everyone's going to show up to defend Gondor. And it's all these people, what is it? Troops from Blackroot Vale, Langstrad, Ringlow Vale, right? Imrahil, the Prince of Dol Amroth, right? All these places. All these people coming in. Again, it reminds me of these histories. It's a subtle show of strength, of ability. Because if you think back, like, how fast could the Romans have gotten an army together? Probably overnight. I need 10,000 guys to fight these dudes. Boom. They'll make it happen. Organized. Efficient. People paid in full. But it's not just that. Because it's not just get an army, show up and fight. Armies need shoes. Armies need weapons and armor and shirts. All these, there's 10,000 little things that an army needs. I'm reading this on Frederick the Great, and I read one on Napoleon as well, where Napoleon would spend a lot of time just haranguing the officials to pay for him to have more shoes, just more shoes. Always with the shoes, because they made leather shoes back in the day, and that crap will wear out, right? They didn't have rubbers or the fancy foams that we have. But it's a constant drive. You would think, well, he's just thinking tactics, right? I'm like, not a lot of times. A lot of times, if you can get your guys blankets, winter clothing on time, because you end up far away from the stuff, right? So it's a whole large element around troop movements. So it shows some of these places aren't just country water places. It shows sort of the lowered state of Gondor because people start complaining. Well, not complaining, they're just nervous. They're like, oh man, that's all? Only 300? I thought we'd get like 1,000. I thought 10,000, so that in their minds, the citizens know there's that amount of troops over there. scale. And then what he does a lot, he builds, he being Tolkien, he builds the dread, the impending, the weight of the upcoming battle by all these side little comments, right? When somebody's like, 500, that's all? It's sort of a depressed, a down, a less than ideal sentiment in his sentence. And he'll pepper these all around. So by the time you get there and then you see this big army, you have that nagging negativity in your mind as a reader already. And so you just slip right into what we can't win or whatever. Now, in the story also, he's killed Gandalf once. Now Gandalf came back, but that's a wizard. So as a reader, I'm worried about who's going to make it. In my mind, Frodo makes it. Even before I finished, I already knew. Like, your main character in a story always makes it, right? At least in a good book. But I can't be sure about everyone else. And so you get real nervous on this battle upcoming. Aragorn. Aragorn in this compared to the film. Now, dude did a good job. Again, I love the movies. He did a great job. But this Aragorn feels more regal, more authoritative. There's a couple of times where, everyone's looking to him to fix something. Even sort of Gandalf is like, well, what do you think we should do? He has that weight, the presence about him. That's what I was going to say. He has a much greater regal presence about him in the books, which I really like. And I think you'll notice if you came to this first through the movie, I think that's an element you'll notice. Or at least look for it. Uh um so our crews are all split up. We haven't talked about Frodo. Pippin, Gandalf are in Minas Tirith. And the rest of the crew are with the Rohirrim. They're going to ride over to Minas Tirith. Cavalry. But the sons of Elrond come. I forget their names. I should have wrote them down. I should have wrote them down in my notes. The sons of Elrond come along with a bunch of other rangers who are just essentially Númenóreans, which is just cool. And then Aragorn, they're like, we're going to go with Aragorn. He's like, I got to take a side path. Otherwise, we're not going to win. Right? He has this far-seeingness about him. He goes through the paths of the dead. And I always like this element in this mythology. There's an entire army stuck in the paths of the dead, where they died, but they're cursed so they won't be released by Elendil. Very cool. They took an oath, right? And you see this a lot in the Silmarillion. It's you sing a song, right, to make the entire universe. But then as things go on, you see people, you make a promise, you make an oath. That oath then will have fruition, right? There's something about the voice. I think there's one battle in the Silmarillion where the dwarves start singing. Like they sing their way into battle, and no one can stand them. Right? The enemy has to fall back. So there's this thing about voice and words being a magical sort of element in the mythology. Bilbo, all that glitters isn't gold. All things that are, some things that wander aren't lost. You have the Witch King. No man can slay me, right? Glorfindel, I think, said this. No, Gandalf, Gollum may have some part to play before the end, right? So, I love that the oaths and words have a power, that he continues the thread throughout the book. And it's not just sort of foreshadowing, that it is a magical element in the story. Yeah, those old ghosts have to come and help him fight because the Dirty Dan's broke an oath. At this time, what is it? Faramir. Oh yeah, poor Faramir. Poor Faramir. He shows up, and again, there's these undercurrents. It doesn't take much for a person, people, to pick up on undercurrent. Usually, there's a friction between him and Denethor, his dad. And I think at some point he's like, you know, do you wish it would have been me who went? Basically, do you wish I would have died instead of Boromir? Basically, is what he's asking. And this fool's like, yes. And I'm like, that's just some savage stuff to say to a kid. You know, I don't care how grown your kid is. You're like, I wish you would have died instead of the other kid. That's just rough. But you automatically don't take it like Denethor is a douchebag, right? Because it's too much. No one, you're never that mean for no reason, right? And I think you sense, or at least I did. I sense some kind of underlying hurt, right? This is more pain somewhere than what we're seeing. Clearly, he's sad his son died, but there's something else. And I don't know. I think if you read the appendices, or I read somewhere else, maybe some other notes or something, where Denethor loses his wife in childbirth, maybe with Faramir, because there's no mom around. And maybe even Faramir looks more like her than Boromir, right? Boromir looks more like Denethor. So you merge those two, and he's heartbroken, that he lost his wife, and then the son reminds him of that, right? It's one of these kind of swirling emotion things. It's just, I'm like, oh, it's just so sad, the whole situation. I also don't think that, because we know that Denethor ends up looking in the Seeing Stones, the Palantir. It's always Sauron. Who knows where he got one? So he could have been feeding that, stoking that resentment as well. Like, it could have passed. But he needed to look for his stewardship. At least that's what he thought. And it festered. Right? The evil festered. So sad. Here, Gandalf hears about Frodo taking the path of Cirith Ungol. One of my all-time favorite words in the whole book. Cirith Ungol. I'm like, it sounds ominous. And it was. Ye old Shelob and whatnot. But for Gandalf, now, it's out of his hands. He can't go help Frodo, which he's thankful for, he says, because the ring would have tempted him. But he knows what that path is, and he's worried, but he can't do anything. Worry does no good. So what he starts to try and do is time things out, right? So you took X amount of time to get here. It would have taken him that long to get there. So he would have reached such and such a day and a half ago at the most, right? He's trying to arrange the pieces on the board. You would think, again, so many times you would think an author or the viewer would want just the sword and board, just swords and cuts and this and that, but you end up really enjoying the sort of the strategy of what's happening. The strategy being Gandalf is trying to distract Sauron as much as he can to give Frodo the best chance just to get to that mountain. He understands where the mountain is. He understands where that is in relation to Cirith Ungol. But that's all he can really do. That's all he can do. We get the Siege of Minas Tirith starting. This might be the hardest part of the book, right? Maybe like you might concern yourself if you're a parent and your kid's like 8. I'm not sure about that. That'd be the only warning I have, because I believe here we catapulting in dead people, right? I believe some of them just the heads. So the siege gets pretty vicious, and it's again the evilest thing. It's not just I don't want to fight you, I don't want to eat you. I want to break your spirit. That's what he wants to do. That he's trying to. He sends Nazgul constantly. Every time they shriek, they lose a little spirit. But I'm sending people you might have known, friends, family, dead, chopped up, just chucking them in there. Nothing you can do. There's nowhere you can go. I'm just trying to be the biggest douche I can be. Right? That's how the siege is going. Very rough. Denethor, Faramir comes back. Denethor kind of loses it. It was the last straw. He did love his son. The love ends up winning out. But just not pleasantly. Poor Denethor. We get the battle. I'm just going through elements. So it's not like. Again, there's some YouTube channels that cover, nothing but this. And they spend all day doing it. So I can't make my video 25 hours long. The Battle of Pelennor Fields. This is sad to me too. I remember reading this. I read this and I cried. And I tear up when it happens in the movie. Because your boy Theoden King goes down. And Nazgul shows up, scares his horse. Horse falls on him. It's one of these things. And then you're like, well, like if Gandalf hadn't taken Shadowfax, then Theoden King wouldn't have died. Because he'd had a horse strong enough to withstand. It's one of those things. But the battle rages on a good time. We all know Eowyn shows up, kills the Witch King. I'm no woman. Love that part. But, again, the parts you can't have in the movie, which work in the book. Eomer shows up. Right? He shows up. He's riding around. I think there's Mary's there. And he rides up on this scene because he sees sort of the king stuff. And, there's the dead king under his horse. And then there's his sister. And he went from, I thought my sister was way back over there in the fortress running the people. I didn't even know she was here. So the shock of seeing her here, and now to go from, I didn't know she's here, to now she's dead, and the king's dead. And he just you can see it'd be almost overwhelming. He's just like, I don't know what this horror of this day is. And then sort of the blood rage gets him, and he just dives deeper into the enemy. But that shock, that initial shock. I know later when they set up sort of a monument for the king until they decide when to move him. Right? On the field of battle. And then he's like, what the crap, what is this? Where's my sister's setup? What are you doing? And they're like, haven't you heard? She's still alive. And, he runs off to the houses of healing. You do feel better when she lives. I know some of the people who came with Aragorn end up dying. It's a heavy battle. I know after the battle, I like that Aragorn doesn't want to enter the city. This has always been a big deal. You read histories and this and that. And, at some point these royalties started to understand that they're royalty. It sounds weird, but you go back way, way back, and I'm just making a move. Right? Romulus founding the Roman Empire. He's just making moves. Then 500 years later, this person's Caesar or in charge or whatever they called him. He's like, Romulus didn't come in here until he was 35. I've come and I'm 30. right? They start comparing themselves to each other, and that just continues on through modern age. You'll get Napoleon wanting to be crowned in the same building as Charlemagne, right? Charlemagne not wanting to enter like Italy or something until it's conquered. Whatever the case may be. I might have made it the last one up. But that these kings do this, they have an awareness that what they do will be written down and mean whatever it means, right? Like, so if I pick a perfect day and I enter America, and the day I enter, there's an explosion or an earthquake or some horrible pestilence starts, right? That looks bad on me. Maybe something there's nothing I can do about it, but sometimes there's stuff you can do, right? So Aragorn's sitting there and he's like, I won't enter the city until everything's perfect because I don't want the return of the king to be anything other than great in people's minds. That's what he's sort of thinking. They don't say this. So he doesn't want to enter the city. But, of course, the hands of the king are the hands of a healer because like they only shoot holes in one. They heal. They can see they've been shot down and captured an enemy plane and lifted back off. Right? They've won wars by themselves. It gets out of hand. I love all of those. I love all of those crazy world leader Kim Jong Il is perfect at golf stories. I love all of them, all throughout history. In any case, he sneaks in the city, meaning I don't want glory because he's not a glory hog. A good check for a king. He heals a bunch of people, including Eowyn, and he sneaks out, sets up a tent outside. But of course, everyone knows. The king came in, but he didn't want the glory. You're right. It's one of these kind of things. You're trying to set up his image. He's his own PR department. They have a council. Again, Aragorn's very regal. Everyone there is like, you are my king. I'll do what you say. Even Gandalf's like, you're in charge. You are the king. And then he's like, well, I'm in charge, but you've worked the most at this, so you advise me and I'll consent, essentially, to Gandalf. So, Gandalf's plan is just get as many armies as you can. It doesn't have to win the war. Just get the biggest army you can and march on the Black Gate, which everyone thinks is kind of suicide. You do not have enough troops. He's been prepping his army for I don't know how many years. You do not have enough troops, even with what you've beat at the Pelennor Fields. But he explains it's like, we don't need to win. We need to distract them. Even if we all die, if Frodo can get that ring to that mountain, everything will work out. And they all agree to it, right? Which is also kind of cool. So they march, and it's not just you get in and you go to the Black Gate, right? Army movements are also a thing, right? Here's the first day Frederick the Great entered Silesia. The army got stuck in mud. The army went over the ice. Whatever else happened becomes part of the story. So his army starts moving. I believe they go down. They go down and up. I think there's a river in between. They go to Minas Morgul, and I believe he tells them to destroy it. That it's unfit. Which is another thing I like. I love that Tolkien makes Aragorn do something with his army. You got 10,000 guys. 10,000 guys can do something. You set them to build a bridge. You sell them. Napoleon would have them make those triumphal arches and stuff like that. People always make their armies do stuff. You just got dudes to go do it. Dig this ditch, make this road, tear down this tower, whatever it is. It's very cool. So they break that, and then they're moving up, and the closer they get to this, it's another element that's just genius. Aragorn starts seeing some of the guys are getting skittish. And I think he sees that it's not that they're chickens. They are scared, but it's Some of them are kind of country folk. And Mordor has just been this boogeyman, this myth, this thing that's not real, but this overriding evil. And now you're telling them that this myth is real, and they have to go face it, right? It's like facing all your childhood fears all at once. And for some people, it may be too much. It's going to be too much. They're still going, but you could see him because he's perceptive. He could see it. So what he does is for them to sort of save face, to not be dishonored by getting to the battle and then fleeing and being said they're cowards, right? He says, basically, there's still some pockets of resistance in some towers. I need a few guys to go handle that. What does he say? I'm going to give you manly deeds to do. So you can not, that fit you. Manly deeds that fit you. I'm a farmer. I ain't got it in me to be bringing down no dark towers. Can you take that fortress back? Yeah, I can do that. So he loses a small pocket to go deal with this side issue. But I like that it's Aragorn, that he sees this, that there's this human element even in this march. Again, it makes the whole thing feel more real. And every real element you can add to a fantasy story always helps that fantasy story. As long as, obviously, you keep your levels going. You lose the levels, then don't bother with any of it. They get to the Black Gate. It opens, I believe. I don't remember. I think it does open. Yeah. Huge army pour out. They get surrounded. And that's where he leaves. Tolkien leaves you there now. He ends one of the books and starts another. The other book being, Frodo and Samwise. And it's a rough place to leave a reader. You are going to motor through whatever happens to Frodo. Which is another element. It's another thing he does so well. He gets you started, then you only care about that. Like, as you start reading this battle, right, the Aragorn movement, the armies, and Gandalf, you forget about Frodo in the sort of in the front of your mind. You care about this battle. He switches. You start reading Frodo, you kind of forget they're in this battle way over here, that he pulls you so hard. And then every so often, he'll give a moment like, Frodo's here, coming out of this tower, and they're just outside of Minas Morgul or something, right? So he keeps you aware of where people are, but you do sort of forget. And like the energy sort of plays off each other too. That energy of knowing that they might be in a battle sort of drives your sense of Frodo needs to hurry, where Frodo's hurrying anyway, right? So the sense that Frodo has internally of I need to get rid of this and do my duty before I get caught and die or whatever. You feel that some as a reader. Works so well. He gets caught with some orcs. Now, again, in a lot of fantasy books, it's just nameless evil. They're just dumb orcs. But here in Tolkien's, he gives you a couple of points where you can get like a window into an entire society as in-depth as everything you've read about Aragorn and the elves and the dwarves. An entire society of the evil half, of orcs and the few bad elves, and the few evil dwarves and the wild men or men that they've corrupted. There's a whole social structure dynamic to them. They have their hopes and their dreams, even though their dreams are evil and robbing you and killing, right? A whole social dynamic to them. You just get a taste of it, though. He gets some multiple armies converge on a crossroads. They get bottlenecked, start fighting each other. Armies get bottlenecked. It happens. We get Mount Doom, right? Poor Frodo has to go on foot. and the ring is just exerting its maximum power on him. It's making itself heavy, it's draining him, it's clouding his mental memory. Everything it can do to just, it's trying to make him put the ring on, right? So everyone knows where it is. But it's trying to corrupt him, and he's just fighting that corruption. I think they get to the mountain, right? Sort of the foot of the mountain, and they're going up. There's a little path. A path made by Sauron so he can walk to his mountain and do his work. They use his same path, which is kind of funny. It's too much, right? He sort of passes out. So Samwise is then carrying his boy when ye old Gollum comes back and attacks. And then again, the moment Gollum's there, Frodo got all kind of energy, because there's always energy spared to resist someone taking your precious. Fight. He runs off. Gollum chases him. And then we have one of the most iconic fights, like in all of literature. And it's Frodo, right? Samwise runs up following him. At some point, Frodo puts the ring on. And so he's invisible, but the Gollum jumps on him. So he has this, he's seeing this weird fight where Gollum's fighting something that's not there, that he can't see. And it's, even from the Silmarillion up to now, it's been thousands of years of the history of Middle-earth has come to a point of these two hobbits, essentially, fighting for a ring in the middle of a volcano. The whole, everything. Everything is at stake with these two hobbits fighting over one ring in a volcano, right? Sauron instantly senses it. He's like, F the battle. His whole force, his whole will is, get me that ring as Nazgul are flying over. They're not going to make it in time. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Now, of course, if Gollum gets it and doesn't die, he would have got the ring back. That'd have been it. It'd have been over. But after all this, for Tolkien to make Frodo fail in the end, because he fails. He didn't want to take the ring off. Gollum had to bite his finger off, right? So there's some punishment for your failure. He failed. He bit this man's finger off. They struggle. Gollum falls into the ring, right? I'm always like, why? And I think it's, again, the power levels. Frodo's not technically royalty. I think, in my mind, because it's a mythology. And then the whole mythology is based on, like all mythologies, humans. So it's not about the gods. It's about how human, the man, can overcome the gods, the problems that they set. Right? So his mythology follows sort of the same rules. So it isn't about the ring or the elves or the dwarves. It's essentially about man. So I think if Aragorn had to take the ring himself, I think he would have overcome where Elendil could not. Elendil should have... No, not Elendil. Isildur. Who am I thinking of? I have to read the books again. I got a name wrong. I think he would have succeeded where Isildur failed, right? Or the ring got a hold of him. I think Aragorn could have dropped it. The king could have dropped it. Right? He's been training essentially in his mind his whole life for this one. But the king didn't take it. Fate worked out a different way. And so, if Frodo had been able to drop it, technically he'd have been better than any of the kings of men. And I'm like, that wouldn't have worked in the power scaling. He had to fail in the end. And then, of course, the king and everyone forgives him because you did a thing. It's such a smart element of the book. Then we get to maybe the most genius part of the whole book. Because I don't know about y'all, but if I read a particularly long book that's very good, I did this as well with, I read a biography of Winston Churchill. Very in depth. By the end, I'm sad that Winnie's dead, that Winston Churchill dies. I'm like, bro, he died in history a long time ago. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm still sad that Winnie's dead, right? You get invested. We readers get invested. So you would have been heavily invested in this bad boy. 3 books in, they're very long. You cared about every minute of it. You could have said, end of the war, they won. And you'd have been like, you'd have felt it a little let down. So what he does is he has a long, long wind down. We're having feasts. We're telling tales of what happened for the historical record. I think we wait months for Arwen to show up so Aragorn could get married and enter the city. Whole big old troop whole big old troop of them leaving. I think where does Aragorn? Aragorn leaves them somewhere on the edge of Gondor. I think. Yeah, he holds up the that green stone, the elf stone. Galadriel leaves them in Lothlorien, I believe. Gandalf, I believe, is the last to leave. He wants to go talk to Tom Bombadil, right? You kind of feel that one, but you're like, well, we can handle it. We're good, right? But the whole time you're like, we're getting close to the Shire, and in your mind as a reader, this is this is retirement. This is the beach. This is the green fields, and nothing can go bad. Well, he has something go bad there, and as you're tapering down, the bad of the Shire just wakes you back up as a reader. And you are as invested in this situation, even though the stakes are so much lower. You're invested in what happens to the Shire as much as you were the ring and the whole world at stake, right? This might as well be the whole world. Again, the way he does, you instantly forget almost everything else. You know, you're right in with them. They have, what is it? Old Sharky's in charge, and there's a bunch of sheriffs. Which, if you look around, it's like that's how totalitarian governments start. It's never top down. It's always from the bottom. It's always 1,000 bad cops is what allows a dictator to be in charge. It's never from the top. If you notice that, so there's an allegory here as well. But our boys now, like, bro, we've been through the mess. We're not gonna stop for no dumb sheriff, and they start pushing people. The hobbits don't know what to do. It's kind of funny. There's a battle with some big people. They win that. Then Sharky turns out to be Saruman. Dude's just a douchebag. And then he ends up dead. And then we wind down again. Last bit of action. Our real ending is Frodo leaving to the Grey Havens because he's a ring bearer. And he says, Sam, you got to follow after me because you carried the ring too. But that's not for years. And that's it. He sort of leaves you at that. Samwise goes back home to his kids. Now, obviously, even in this print up, how much is this? A good chunk of this book is going to be the appendices. And if you were like me, you went right into that bad boy. I went right in like it's part of the book. It's not. But, again, it's fun information to have. That's Lord of the Rings. I did it in a decent amount of time. All right. I'm going to run ads. This isn't the last time I'll be covering Lord of the Rings. I got 3 audiobooks. So I'm going to cover the audiobook versions of them too. I might cover the movies. I don't know. Might be the only movies I cover on the channel. Maybe not. Maybe not. I'll stick to books. Gotta focus. Maybe I will. I don't know. But I am covering those audiobooks. Andy Serkis does amazing. Alright. These were my books. You know the drill. If you want one, you buy one. If you don't, just keep watching. Subscribe. What are we supposed to say? Like and subscribe. Okay, people. Um, thank you. Thank you for watching these videos. These are buckets of fun. I will see you, lovely lot, next week.